Hi, this is Genealogy with Gary, and back again for Genealogy Lesson 3. And right now, on the last one, I told you to make some file folders. And if you haven't gotten to Google Cloud or Gmail or Dropbox, you make a decision on where you want to put something as far as electronically. And my suggestion was not to have it on an external drive, or you could have it, but just have it as a backup. And realize those external drives, they go bad, just like your computers tend to crash. So that's the reason I like to have mine in the cloud. Sounds kind of weird, information up in the cloud. Well, anyways, for today, I wanted to focus on some of the folks who are alive and trying to get information from them. And hopefully you have grandparents, even great-grandparents would be great. If you even have great-great-grandparents, wow. Don't know how many people have that, but if you have old folks in the family there, my suggestion is interview them, get the information now. And so the big question is, what do I ask them? Well, you could do it several ways. I would suggest you get your phone, record the information so you're not sitting there. You can listen to them and really enjoy the story, and you can ask questions, and later on you can write down the responses. But so how do I know what to ask them? You can do a preset questions. You can ask yourself, what is it that we want to know? Because I think one of the things that's going to make your genealogy more interesting for you and for other people is if you have stories in there, and if you make that information come alive. Because if it's only somebody got married at this age, this is when they did this, and they went to school, most people are they're gonna yawn. Not gonna be exciting. But you can put a little juice in there. People like that, and I think that's what you're looking for too. I hope. But one of the things I would do is if I'm trying to figure out what exactly do I want to ask them, try doing this. And since we got the coronavirus time, this might be a good time to do this, is do just a short skit of your autobiography. It doesn't have to be perfect English, but just think to yourself like, well, I'm going to write my own story of my life. What do I want my descendants to remember me by? And, we're not talking about real sad, if I die or something. What is your story? What is your story? What are interesting things? What do you think they would find to be interesting? And as you write this, there's going to be something you're going to say, I don't want to tell them about the girlfriends I had. I don't want them to find out about this. But some things you'll find to be very interesting. Maybe in the old days you had a black and white TV, and you had to actually go and turn on the channels. Maybe in the old days, kids actually played outside, and you go sledding, you do different things, maybe mow yards for money. Whatever. I think what people really like to hear is technology or things that were done back in your day that aren't done anymore. I remember my mom telling me stories that when she was a teenager, that everybody in the neighborhood would go to the one house that had a TV. You have like 25 kids watching the TV, watching a cartoon, and it's a crazy story. I mean, it's amazing for me to hear that. I'm sure many of our kids, if they heard that we had a phone that was on the wall, and that's even happened to us when my daughter was young. Boy, she'd get on the phone, and we couldn't talk for an hour or two. There was Rosie on the phone until I unplugged it. But I think sometimes they'll be amazed at how life was back then. And I also believe right now during the coronavirus, write down the responses, write down what's going on. This is some crazy stuff going on here, You have to stay home. You have to stay 6 feet in front of people. People are wearing masks, gloves. Many people are home right now. A lot of people lost their jobs, and also writing about the tough times. How about the fact that it's hard to find a roll of toilet paper right now? It's crazy why everybody went crazy about toilet paper and water, and if you write your experiences when they're fresh, I think they're going to be really interesting. So um, think about the things in life you went through. If you look at your stories when you went to elementary school, if there's maybe one or two key stories you want to remember, and they're not just going to want to know where you went to school, but hey, maybe what is it that you knew about or what stood out. I was in sports, so I'm sure I would talk about our old football games and wrestling and track. It's really personal what each person will remember. Um, and then if you talk about you're going out with somebody like your wife, your husband, where did you first meet? That's what, the young people want to hear. Hey, how did you guys meet? Did you look at who looked at each other first? You don't have to get into all the sordid details. Just give them the G-rated version, okay? And the kids like to hear that. They like to hear, well, where did you guys meet? How did you meet? Was maybe the early date, maybe an early date, and then your jobs, why you moved. I think that's really important. Time takes time to think about that. Like, why we moved from Houston to Milwaukee. Well, my family was in Milwaukee, and I'm giving you my example. They said, "Hey, come back to Milwaukee. What are you doing in Houston?" And we know you got the original job there, but come back here even though you're going to make a little less money. And I just thought, well, have the kids grow up see their grandparents and have uncles and aunts. So you can, the more you can personalize it, the more they can find of interest. Now, again, you don't have to put everything in there. I definitely wouldn't want to put down if I was a fighter when I was young. I don't know if I'd want to write that down. But if you feel embarrassed about something, do I have to write it? No, you don't have to. It's your autobiography. It's what you want. And now, once you get done writing that, this is something you're going to notice. You're going to notice there's some things you didn't put down. And sometimes we exaggerate a little bit about the past. Sometimes we forget things. I know my dad tells me that his football team, when he goes back to his family reunions every year, he goes, every year the football team gets better. Pretty soon we're going to win state. Our perception of the past changes also. It does change with over the years. Sometimes it looks better, sometimes it looks worse. And my dad's point of view, their football team kept getting better every year. And we tend to maybe forget some of the other stuff, which is fine. And I would also say maybe some other things you might want to let them know about is, the music you listen to, or what were your hobbies, what were the things that you did, especially things that we don't do anymore today. And if you put your questioning like that, if you say, okay, this is what I want to know, because what you want to know is different than what I do. We're not going to be the same. You're going to say, oh yeah, well, I'm going to ask Grandma questions, and this is, you can kind of just do an outline on your paper, and then when you talk to her, you can, let the conversation flow is what I like to do, and give yourself enough time. Some of your grandparents, some of them talk a lot, some not that much, but let them tell us stories, and especially if there's stories you said, I've heard this one since childhood, have it recorded so that you can get the exact story, because it's like my grandma told me stories, I didn't write them down, and I thought about it 25 years later, and I said, oh man, how did that story go? I can't remember exactly. So yeah, have it recorded, because chances are you may end up losing it if you don't. So I guess the assignment this week, it sounds like a teacher, I am. The assignment is just jot down a short autobiography of yourself. Then once you're done with that, then you can say, what is it that I want to find out about? Interview from my ancestors, not my ancestors, some of my grandparents, maybe aunts and uncles. Get to know the old ones that really know the family history, and they will tell you. By the way, you will find some interesting stories. Let me finish up by telling you kind of an interesting story. What happened with me is I did a DNA test through Ancestry.com, and this one lady, her name is Lorena Torres, she contacted me, and she said, "Oh, our DNA matches, and I noticed your name. You said your grandma's name was Gallegos. Well, this is our family." And we got together and we talked on the phone, and she told me that her mother knew my great grandmother. I didn't know my great grandmother. She passed away in 1930. And even, no, I'm sorry, she knew my great great grandmother. So I wouldn't even know. And I said, "She knew her?" She goes, "Yeah, she knew her." Wow. And she said, "My mom is still alive. She's 104. And I said, "She's still alive? Can I go interview her?" "Yes, yes, come on down to, I think it's near Hondo, New Mexico." And me and my wife went there. I will tell you, it's very interesting. When we first went, they were nervous because we were just talked on the phone. Who is this strange guy coming to the house talking to Grandma? And when I got there, there was about 7 or 8 people there, and the one guy asked me, "Well, how are you related?" And I told him the story. He goes, "Oh, you're the Gallegos that left New Mexico or left for Las Cruces." Oh, is that good or bad? But anyways, I talked to this old lady, and she had such great stories. She opened my eyes more to the family. We got to learn about our family that Grandma never told us. I mean, she didn't tell us that much about. But the old lady, I remember the one story she told us that was really interesting was she said when they were real young, like 12 years old, what they would do is they'd want to go to dances. And that time, 1920, maybe, yeah, 1920 or so, not many people had cars. So what they would do is they would wait along the side of the road, and a trucker would come by. He had a bunch of apples on his truck. Well, he'd stop. The girls would jump on top of the truck where the apples were, and he'd drive them to another town, and they'd go for a little dance. And the girls would stay at somebody's house that night. And when the truck went back from El Paso to this little town, the truck was empty, and the guy would stop. The girls would get on top of the bed of the truck, and he'd drive her to that area. And that's how they went to these dances. And it's just a phenomenal story. I can't just imagine 12 to 15-year-old girls, getting on top of an apple truck. But it's a very interesting story. So for today, guys, just write that autobiography. Figure out what you think is important. But also, as you're doing this, think about, you wrote the autobiography. You realize that what's important to you. What do you want to interview? What kind of questions do you want to ask? But the other thing is also just kind of keep in mind, people are going to tell you the side of history. There's going to be things they might leave out. Do you want to prod to get that information? That's up to you. But it may kind of give you a glimpse as when they tell you stories, there may be things they may not want to tell you, or they may have conveniently forgotten. But I think that will make your interviews a lot more interesting. And now you got your information for yourself, for your descendants, so they get to know about you. And this way you get some ownership to it. You get to figure out what you want them to know about you. Have a good day, guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye. Whoops.